There's a quiet feeling you've carried one you couldn't quite name. A subtle knowing that something in the world, or maybe in you, was just off. Not wrong, not broken, just not in tune. You tried to explain it, maybe even ignore it, but it never left. That feeling wasn't confusion, it was remembrance. This isn't a journey of learning, it's one of remembering. Vibration isn't a new language, it's your first one. Before words, before beliefs, there was energy. Pure, unfiltered frequency. And somewhere along the way, you forgot how to hear it. You don't need to become someone else. You only need to return to a self you haven't lost, only silenced. The work isn't to force change. It's to gently listen, to feel, to breathe, to let the noise fade just long enough to hear the quiet hum of your original signal. The path ahead isn't outside you. It begins in silence. It begins now. You ever feel like you're doing everything right, but something still feels off? You're showing up. You speak kindly. You meditate. You read all the books. You even repeat the affirmations with your hand over your heart. And still life doesn't move the way you thought it would. It's like you're pushing on a door that just won't open. Here's the truth no one tells you. Sometimes it's not about what you do. It's about what you vibrate. Because everything is energy. Not in the abstract, new agey kind of way, but in the most literal sense. Your thoughts, energy. Your breath, energy. That quiet ache behind your smile, energy. And more than that, your entire life is a reflection of the frequency you carry most often. Not your highest moment, not your best day, but the baseline hum your soul emits when no one's watching. Thoth called this the invisible prison. A reality that looks like freedom on the outside, but is shaped by unconscious frequencies on the inside. You think you're choosing. You think you're creating. But beneath it all, there's a vibration quietly orchestrating everything: relationships, opportunities, even the way people treat you. And if that frequency is tangled in fear, doubt, or unhealed patterns, you'll keep repeating the same lessons, no matter how hard you try to evolve. It's not punishment, it's resonance. The universe isn't against you, it's just echoing you. Take a moment right now. Close your eyes if it helps. Feel into your body. What does it say when you're not speaking? That feeling, that sensation in your chest, in your gut, in the silence between thoughts, that's your frequency speaking. Not your words, not your mindset. That. You see, vibration isn't a metaphor. It's your signature in the field. It's your presence made visible through energy. And like a tuning fork, the world around you responds to it with stunning precision. Thoth didn't leave behind a rule book. He left a code. And part of that code, realizing you don't shift your life by chasing results, you shift it by tuning your internal state. Not to some lofty, unattainable, high vibe, but to the most honest frequency available to you in this moment. Your alignment isn't about being perfect. It's about being true. When your inner signal becomes congruent with who you are, what you feel, and how you breathe all align, then the external world has no choice but to harmonize. So if life feels misaligned right now, don't fix the world. Feel your tone. Listen for the frequency behind the doing. Because sometimes healing begins not by doing more, but by remembering what you've always been: a silent pulse, a vibrating truth, a frequency longing to come home. We've been told it's all about desire. Want it hard enough, visualize it clearly, affirm it loudly, and the universe will hand it to you like a well-wrapped gift. That's the law of attraction, right? But what if wanting isn't enough? What if the universe isn't listening to your words, but to your wavelength? You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. Not who you wish to be, not who you pretend to be, but the silent signal pulsing from your nervous system, your beliefs, your emotions. That's the message that travels farthest. That's the frequency the universe responds to. Think of it like this: your outer world is a mirror, but it's not showing you your dreams. It's showing you your vibration. Every feeling you repeat becomes part of your signature. Joy, it carves a pathway in your field. Resentment, it echoes even when you smile. Fear, it hums beneath your decisions, shaping what you allow yourself to reach for. The universe doesn't judge these signals, it simply reflects them. So you can say, I want abundance, but if you vibrate scarcity, your field will remain closed. You can visualize the perfect love, but if your energy is still carrying betrayal, it won't feel safe enough to arrive. That's not failure, it's physics. Thoth didn't come to teach manifesting techniques. He came to remind us that creation begins before thought. His tablets don't read like a manual. They feel like a whisper, a vibration encoded in metaphor. And only those quiet enough to listen will hear what's really being said. He didn't offer instructions, he left keys. And one of the first keys? Stop asking and start attuning. Because what you're asking for may not match the frequency you're living in. So pause and ask yourself not, what do I want? But rather, what do I broadcast without knowing it? What emotion am I sending out most often? What truth am I vibrating when I think no one is watching? This isn't about shame, it's about alignment. Because the moment you start vibrating from who you truly are, not from who you think you need to be, life will begin to shift. Not because it was holding out on you, but because it was waiting for you to become the match. You can think positively all day long. You can script your dreams, visualize your future, say, I am abundant, over and over again. But if beneath all those words is an emotion you haven't faced, one that tightens your chest, dims your breath, or hides behind a practiced smile, then that is what your field will carry. The universe doesn't respond to language. It responds to energy. And emotion is energy in motion, your most honest broadcast. Not your mask, not your mindset, but the raw, often wordless pulse that tells the truth even when you don't want it to. This is why thinking positive can leave you exhausted. Because when your emotions are vibrating scarcity, fear, or shame beneath a surface of forced joy, the mismatch becomes the message. It's like putting a fresh coat of paint over a cracked wall. The break still speaks, and the field still listens. This is why so many people feel stuck. They say all the right things. They act like they believe. But deep down, something within them still carries the memory of being unseen, unheard, unloved. These emotions become codes, unconscious signatures that shape what's allowed to enter your life. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you haven't yet harmonized with what's true. Thoth didn't come to silence pain. He came to teach us how to feel through it, how to read it as language, as light distorted into sound, asking to be remembered. The ancient texts don't shame human emotion. They point to it as a sacred tool. Your grief is not a flaw. Your anger is not a mistake. These are vibrations asking for space. And when they're given that space, not dramatized, not suppressed, but simply witnessed, they start to dissolve. Slowly, gently, like ice melting under the sun. Imagine this: every emotion you've buried becomes a magnet. Each unspoken fear, a quiet hum in your field. The longer it goes unnoticed, the stronger it echoes. But the moment you sit with it, not to fix it, but to feel it, it begins to release. Your body knows how. It always has. The trembling in your hands, the tears behind your eyes, the tightness in your gut, they are all parts of a map. A vibrational map. And the universe doesn't read intentions. It reads this map. You may think you're attracting chaos, but maybe you're just broadcasting confusion. You may believe you're attracting scarcity, but perhaps you're still vibrating with memories of not enough. This isn't about guilt, it's about awareness. Because only when you know what you're broadcasting can you begin to choose differently. Not by force, but by presence. By slowly, lovingly shifting the way you hold yourself inside. And that's the miracle. You don't have to erase old emotions. You don't have to become someone new. You just have to stop fighting what's real. Feel it. Allow it. Let it move through you. And your vibration will begin to change because you're no longer out of sync with yourself. And when that happens, everything else starts to follow. Not instantly, but inevitably. Because emotion is the signature the universe cannot ignore. There are moments when everything outside looks fine. The career is steady. The relationships seem intact. You're checking all the boxes you thought would bring peace. And yet something inside feels off. Subtly, but persistently. Like a radio playing slightly out of tune, you can't quite explain it. But the more you try to push through, the louder it gets. This dissonance isn't a flaw, it's a signal. It's your inner field telling you that alignment has slipped not in the world around you, but in the space within. Most of us were taught to manage our lives by adjusting the outer parts. Work harder, communicate more, fix what's broken. But Thoth knew the real recalibration starts deeper. He didn't leave us rituals to follow blindly. He left maps to return to our own energetic center, the point of stillness from which all creation begins. Imagine your energy like concentric waves rippling from a single drop. If the drop is still, the ripples are smooth. If it trembles, the entire field distorts. That drop is your center. And the world doesn't just respond to your actions, it responds to the state of that center. You've likely felt it before. Moments when everything slowed. When you weren't solving, controlling, or chasing. When you simply paused, and in that pause, clarity emerged. That's not coincidence. That's coherence. But here's the catch. Balance doesn't mean having it all figured out. It doesn't require a master plan or a perfect routine. True balance begins the moment you stop resisting what is. You don't need to know what's next. You only need to breathe into now. This is where most of us get lost. We think inner peace comes from solving every problem. But in truth, it often arrives when we finally let go of needing to. The nervous system softens. The mind stops reaching. And the body, long ignored, begins to speak in a language older than words. You feel grounded, not because life is perfect, but because you're no longer running from it. Thoth taught that resistance fractures the field. The more we push against what's happening, the more we vibrate in chaos. But when we surrender not as defeat, but as devotion to presence, the field begins to harmonize. Stillness becomes a tuning fork, and the noise of the world no longer shakes you because you're anchored in something deeper than thought. Recalibration doesn't require a retreat or a ritual. It requires a moment, one breath, one decision to drop back into the space behind the stories, the silence beneath the need to fix. When you return to that space, you remember. This is who you are, not the noise, not the roles, but the awareness beneath them. And from that awareness, balance naturally unfolds not as something you control, but as something you become. So if your life feels scattered, start not with your schedule, but with your stillness. Come back to the center not to escape, but to remember it never left. And from that place, the field begins to recalibrate. Gently, powerfully, in its own perfect rhythm. It's easy to think healing is something that happens in the mind. That if we think differently, speak differently, everything else will shift. But your body knows a deeper truth. Long before you formed language, your body was storing emotion, imprinting every moment of fear, tension, or abandonment into your energetic field. This isn't metaphor. This is memory written in breath, in bone, in the spaces you avoid touching. You carry so much more than you realize, and yet you're not broken. You're just full of moments that never got to move. That's what energy blockages really are. Emotions that wanted to flow but got frozen instead. A fear you didn't voice. A grief you silenced to keep functioning. A moment you ignored because there was no room for it. Each one didn't disappear. It settled. It created tension not just in the muscles, but in the field around you. And over time, that tension begins to broadcast. You might call it anxiety, fatigue, fog. But beneath every symptom is the same invitation. Feel me so I can move. Thoth didn't talk about chakras or meridians the way modern systems do, but he understood energy as architecture. Vital force moves through you like rivers through earth, and when one river clogs, the whole landscape dries. The key isn't to fix it. The key is to feel it. So pause. Drop your awareness out of the mind into the body. Where do you feel tight? Is there a subtle ache behind your chest? A knot in the stomach? A clench in your jaw you didn't notice until now? You don't need a diagnosis, just presence. Just breathe into that space, not to force it open, but to let it know you're safe now. And then listen. Sometimes it'll soften. Sometimes it won't. But either way, you've begun the process. You've let the energy know it no longer has to hide. Healing isn't a sprint, it's a return to sensation, to letting the body speak in its own rhythm. Movement can help gentle swaying, walking barefoot, humming softly. So can silence. What matters isn't the tool, it's the trust. The trust that your body already knows how to release if only given permission. You've spent years ignoring it, overriding it, but it has never abandoned you. It's still waiting for breath, for warmth, for your hand to finally rest on the place that hurts. When energy moves again, you'll feel it not as fireworks, but as relief, as space, as a lightness where there used to be holding. And slowly, the channels begin to open. Life begins to flow not because something outside changed, but because you did. Because you stopped trying to escape the body and chose instead to come home to it. That is healing. That is freedom. And that is your power to feel, and in feeling, to let go. Before there was form, there was sound. Not the kind that moves through air, but vibration, rippling through the field, shaping the invisible into the seen. Every word you speak, every breath you release, every silent intention held behind your eyes, it all carries a frequency. And that frequency forms structure. You don't just speak into the world, you architect it. Sound is not decoration, it's design. Ancient texts spoke of this not as metaphor, but as law. Thoth didn't just write with symbols. He encoded wisdom in resonance. He understood that truth doesn't need volume, it needs clarity. And the clearest sounds are the ones aligned with being. Think of your voice not just the audible one, but the one that lives in your head, the one that narrates your life. That voice is always broadcasting. Is it loving? Is it harsh? Does it echo someone else's beliefs, or is it tuned to your inner truth? Most of us speak without presence. We let words fall out of habit. We affirm things we don't feel. And the field hears all of it. Not the grammar, the vibration. There's a reason affirmations sometimes don't work. If the voice is forced, the frequency fractures. But when you speak from stillness, from that place in you that knows, you don't need volume. Even a whisper carries weight. Even silence has a sound when it's infused with presence. That's what Thoth meant when he said, "Sing even in silence." He wasn't asking you to perform. He was inviting you to vibrate honestly. And the most honest sound you can make is one that needs no translation. A hum from your belly, a breath that feels like song, a note you don't plan, just allow. You don't need to be a singer. You don't need to understand music. You only need to listen to yourself with no filter. Try it. Close your eyes. Place a hand on your chest. And without thinking, let a sound rise. Maybe it's soft. Maybe it wavers. But let it be real. Let it be yours. This isn't performance. It's tuning. You're not trying to impress the universe. You're remembering how to harmonize with it. That's what sound does. It reveals where you're aligned and where you're not. It shows you the cracks, not to shame you, but to invite coherence. Over time, this practice becomes less about sound and more about intention. You begin to feel that every thought is a note, every choice a chord, every moment a chance to resonate or to distort. And you choose, again and again, to sing your truth even if only you can hear it. In a world full of noise, that is your power. Not to be the loudest, but to be the clearest. To hum with the frequency of who you really are. And in doing so, to shape a reality that sings back to you. Before you understood language, before you learned to name the world, you recognized patterns. Circles within circles. Petals spiraling like galaxies. The rhythm of leaves, the spiral of a shell, the silent math behind the beauty of a snowflake. These were your first truths, not taught, but remembered. And at the heart of them all is the flower of life. To some, it looks like just a design, a pattern etched in temples or printed on journals. But to those who see with the inner eye, it's not an image, it's a vibration. A memory, the original architecture of existence. The flower isn't just sacred geometry. It's the blueprint of life encoded in form. Every line, every intersection, every circle reverberates with frequency. You don't understand it with your intellect. You recognize it somewhere deeper, quieter. That soft recognition is not imagination. It's resonance. Thoth didn't leave behind explanations. He left keys. And this flower is one of them. A visual frequency that bypasses logic and speaks directly to your cellular memory. When you gaze at it, not glance, but really see, something stirs. Not a thought, but a sensation. A subtle click inside, like a puzzle piece returning to its place. The flower reminds you of the order behind the chaos, the symmetry beneath the noise. In a world where everything feels fragmented, it offers wholeness. Not because you understand every angle, but because something inside you aligns. That's the power of sacred geometry. It's not symbolic. It is the symbol, the message and the messenger, the shape and the song. You don't need to analyze it. In fact, the less you try to dissect, the more it reveals. Place it where you sit. Look at it when you wake. Breathe with it, not to decode, but to co-resonate. The breath, the gaze, the stillness, they form a triangle of presence. And within that triangle, the flower blooms again, not on the page, but in you. You may notice shifts, not dramatic, but undeniable. A little more clarity, a little more coherence. As if your life begins to move with rhythm, not resistance. That's no coincidence. That's geometry doing its work, not outside, but within the energetic lattice that shapes your choices, your emotions, your timing. It's subtle but real, like remembering a song you didn't know you forgot, like returning to a language your soul always spoke. So don't try to get it, let it get you. Let it find the part of you that still speaks in spirals and listens in symbols. The part that knows healing doesn't come through explanation, but through reconnection. Let the flower do what it came to do, not to teach, but to awaken. Not to show you something new, but to help you remember what you've always known. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it flickers, quietly, deep inside, not as resistance, but as willingness to stay, to face, to feel. That flicker is the fire within, and it has always been there waiting, not for your perfection, but for your presence. Thoth never spoke of destroying darkness. He spoke of transmuting, not fighting fear, but sitting with it, letting it rise like smoke until it meets the flame of your awareness and burns clean. This is not about willpower. This is not about force. It's about remembering fire is not what you summon. It's what you become when you stop running. You've been taught to avoid discomfort, to bury pain, distract it, label it as weakness. But pain, when met fully, becomes fuel. Fear, when honored without being obeyed, becomes a doorway. That is the secret of inner alchemy. You don't remove the shadow, you light it from within. Think of a time you felt something heavy, shame, grief, rage. Where did it go? Most likely nowhere. It sat in your chest. It tightened your breath. It distorted your energy field, even as you smiled on the outside. Now imagine meeting that same emotion differently. Not with judgment, but with breath. Not with resistance, but with presence. Imagine standing still as it rises, feeling its heat, and letting your awareness ignite it, not to destroy it, but to transform it. That's the fire Thoth spoke of. The one that burns illusions, not people. The one that refines, not punishes. You don't need to be fearless to be free. You only need to be honest. Honest enough to say, I'm afraid. Honest enough to stay anyway. The fire doesn't ask you to overcome the dark. It asks you to witness it, to be with what is until what is becomes light. And light doesn't scream. It doesn't demand. It simply shines. When you let yourself burn not in chaos, but in clarity, you begin to emit something different. A frequency that doesn't match the noise around you. A signal that says, I am no longer hiding. This changes everything. Not instantly, but irreversibly. You begin to move from truth, not from wounds. You begin to make choices that don't repeat the past. And slowly, the fear that once held you back becomes the very heat that drives you forward. This is the path of vibrational courage. Not the absence of emotion, but the transmutation of it. Not the denial of pain, but the willingness to be with it until it changes shape. You become the fire not to burn down your life, but to light the way home. So when fear rises, don't ask how to eliminate it. Ask how to hold it. Ask how to let it breathe. And then bring your flame, even if it's small, even if it trembles. Because once it lights the truth in you, nothing can dim it again. There is nothing more you need to learn. Not really. What you seek isn't out there, it's already echoing within. Thoth didn't give you answers. He gave you remembrance. Not instructions, but vibrations. Not a path, but a key. The right frequency never shouts. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It hums quietly, steadily from the center of your being. And when you finally align with it, when you stop trying to become and simply allow yourself to be, the world responds. Not because you forced it, but because the field has no choice. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are the code you've been trying to crack, the resonance you've been trying to tune into, the vibration that changes the room, the moment, the life just by existing. So breathe, not to fix, but to feel, to remember. Because once you vibrate with truth, the rest takes care of itself.